and the speaker is live. At the time tap, 1, 2, it is now 1100 hours. Every mission prior to takeoff, we had a pre-mission briefing. This briefing was so important. The commanding officer would be there, the director of operations, director of maintenance, the flight crew, the backup crew, intel, weather, ops planners. They would put this pre-mission brief together 2 hours prior to flight. And it was so important because we went over the flight. We had the time hack. We started with that time. From that time on, we went into radio silence. So at this time, could you join me and please put your phones on silent and be a part of our briefing. And I'll let you introduce technology. We did test this before. It's okay. Yep.
There you go.
Not for your hair, Rob.
It might have to be closer to work from that angle.
Okay. This is our layout. We're going to program, brief, introduction to stage, possible questions and discussions, and a tribute to Kelly. We're going back old school. This is our panel. Next slide, please. Tom.
Hi, Robby. Obviously, that's me on the left side. I flew every single operational mission with Stan Goodmanson. We were, as Robby mentioned, we were in the pre-mission briefing. We were the Sun brothers, S-O-N. So Danielson, Goodmanson. So that proves that actually I flew the airplane. Notice we have full pressure suits. The suits are the same suits that were worn by the Gemini astronauts in the first 5 missions on the space shuttle that had ejection seats. So they're fully certified for spacewalking suits, and just became part of your day at the office. Never want to fly the airplane without the full suit on. So that's enough of that.
Good morning. We're present. Okay, so we're present on the screen, and happy to have you a chance to talk to you all this morning. My name is John Manzi. I was a reconnaissance systems officer. In my case, the guy in the back seat. And in the picture with me is my trustworthy pilot and great friend Terry Pappas, who's in the room with us as well. This is a really fun symposium for me to be at, because for the first time since this airplane was delivered to this museum, the 2 crew members who brought it here are here together. Terry and I flew this airplane down here in 1990 when it was designated for the care and keeping here at the Field Museum. So, great to speak with Terry, it's great for us to both be back here. I came up through Air Force ROTC and was happily sent off to navigator training after college. And while at college, I think like everybody who got involved in this program, when I became aware that this airplane even existed, which was pretty much revealed during my years in college, I was just amazed that a navigator would be able to be in this airplane. So that was kind of my goal. And after flying in a couple different airplanes of the 1960s era, F-111s and RF-4s, I was lucky enough to get selected in the program. And that's when Terry and I met each other, and we flew many of my operational missions together, and found it extremely satisfying and fascinating always to be a part of this program. And later we'll tailor more of some of the details of the program, and be happy to answer your questions. Thanks.
Good morning. My name is Dave Burns. I'm the crew chief on the aircraft. I was in maintenance, the 9th OMS Organizational Maintenance Plane. I came to Beale in 1974 in March as a 7-level staff sergeant in the Air Force after 4 years, and got into the program and spent 5 years at Beale, and then 3 years in Okinawa at the detachment at Det 1 as a crew chief on the program. So a total of roughly 8 years. And then I went on to other bigger and better things, believe it or not. But it was a good time. It was a great aircraft, and we'll be talking more about it as the hour goes on. So pass it on to Harvey.
So they have these up here so we know what their name is. So I work photo. I started out after tech school working RF-4Cs at Shaw Air Force Base. I worked the cameras in the shop, and then went to Kadena and worked the airplane over there. I kept extending because I kept getting orders back to Shaw, and I hated Shaw. So I then extended for a year and got orders to build. I says, cool, I'll go to build. So the first thing they do is they assign you to one of the camera systems. And I actually wanted to work the U2, but they put me back in the OBC and IRIS section. And I went to LTD for the OBC, and I worked the OBC and IRIS for 4 years. Then I got orders to go to Det 1, and just before I went to Det 1, I went to LTD again to further attack, and the whole time I'm at Okinawa, I also worked with attack, like 99% of the time. Unless I was on leave, I loaded the film, I did the pre-flights, the PPOs, the long functional checks, everything on it. And then come time to depart Okinawa, I kept calling SAC assignments to make sure I get back to Bill because I didn't want to screw up sending back to TAC. And I got to Bill, there maybe one day, and shop chief says, well, I need you to run swing shift, and I need you to come in tonight if you can. I says, why? You know, don't I get time in process? He says, well, you can do that during the day. He says, I need you to run the night shift. So I went to nights. Then I stayed at Bill. I actually promoted myself out of a job when I made master sergeant. I made shop chief, which I hated. I stayed there. When they retired the airplane in '90, then just worked the U2. And being shop chief, I didn't get to do much work except for paperwork. And then I retired in '92. Went to work for Hewlett Packard after that.
Again, my name is Robby Butterfield. I was fortunate enough to go on the program after leaving Guam. And I was there in 82 to 84 at Beale. And then they fired me and I went to England as the superintendent of maintenance. So I didn't work on the aircraft anymore. I ended up in supervision, which you do a lot of planning and getting things done. Next slide. This is the man, Kelly Johnson. He is the one that designed it. If you're in any management or any kind of leadership role, I highly recommend reading the 14 Rules of Kelly Johnson. These are very important. After I worked for the Air Force and retired, I went to work for the Navy, and I used those rules, and it streamlined a lot of things. So my program office liked it. They didn't quite understand it because it's the Navy. That's just a joke. Good guys. A lot of work. The challenges of the aircraft, we had to make sure the aircraft was at 2,100 miles an hour, 80,000 feet. Airframe had to take the temperatures, and this was all built with a slide rule. Most people don't understand what that is, but it's a piece of technology that worked quite well. Next one. This is Oxcar's timeline, but it also shows you how fast the aircraft was built. 31 months from go to flying. 31 months. F-35, 20 years, 25 years. Next slide. This is the whole overall Archangel, and each of these programs were part of it. And that's the total number of aircraft built. We had 32 SR-71s from A, B, and C, and the B's were trainers. Next slide. Everything had to be built. Everything was made in America except where we got the materials. Would you like to learn this?
The interesting thing is that, how should I say it? The Soviet Union hated the airplane. They built airplanes, MiG-25 specifically, to combat the SR-71. Kelly Johnson, in his infant of wisdom, had a shell company set up to buy titanium from the Soviets. They produced more titanium in the world than anybody else did. So the airplane was built largely with Soviet titanium. And they hated us for it. They hated the airplane. They said, where did you get all that titanium? Well,
This is the radar cross-section.
So one thing, when you look at the SR-71 and its predecessor, the A-12, even today it looks futuristic. And that's because it was built to operate at an extremely high level of performance. But the design had some very specific goals in mind. Robby mentioned a couple. This had to fly higher and a lot faster than the U-2, which in 1960, I think we all know the story, Gary Harris was shot down. They're so convinced they would need a better airframe to collect intelligence. Kelly and his team were already working on the design in 1958 timeframe. So they anticipated, like good futurists, the problems that they were going to have to overcome in the future. And but along with designing the airplane to go very high and very fast, which makes it a very difficult target. You imagine shooting a bullet down with a bullet. That was basically the problem we were presenting to the Soviets primarily. The CIA, the original contract with Lockheed was to build the A-12. That was a CIA airplane. And the the CIA wanted to make it as defensible a platform as possible. So in addition to going high and fast, they wanted to limit the radar, or reduce the radar cross-section of the airplane. So this picture is showing you, I believe this is an actual replica of the platform out in the desert in Area 51 when they were testing the radar cross-section of the airplane. And for reasons a good engineer can explain to you, and B.C. Thomas can probably do a good job of that, it's actually mounted on this pole inverted. And the reason they did that is they could project radar energy at it from different angles and figure out exactly what we believe the Soviets would see. And the objective was to make a big airplane that's over about 107 feet long and 50-some feet wide look really small, and make it hard to detect and then hard to target, hard to track it, which means a missile would have a very hard time touching the airplane. So this is how they do it. This is a very common practice. And one interesting fact about this is that this was also the era where satellites were starting to become a real factor in terms of collecting intelligence as well. And whenever a satellite comes overhead, it's fairly predictable because it's in a known orbit. They would try and hide this thing, and what they didn't know until later is that the shadow was casting on the pavement beneath this model was actually cooling the pavement such that the outline of the airplane was detectable from space. So the Soviets actually had kind of an idea of what we were doing. Not a photograph of it, but they had an idea of what the shape of the airplane would look like.
We're more fortunate today to have A.C. Chris Flyer here. He was the designer of the chimes. Would you mind standing up, sir? He designed the chimes of the airplane, and we'd like to point it out to you. Thank you, sir. Said you only flew 1 hour and 4 minutes. Right. So you're not only he does slides, but he goes fast. Next slide, please. This is the heat from the airplane and the different temperatures and stuff.
And here's an example of the high temperature of the airplane, even though we're operating in 98.5% of the atmosphere is below us. The airplane is going so fast in the top 1.5% of the atmosphere. By the way, Columbus was right with the world that is curved. You can see that from where we are. But because the airplane was so fast, it had to operate in the atmosphere because the engines required air to operate. But speed equals heat. The airplane got extremely hot. The only thing I'll point out is a real busy slide, but the front windscreen, which is triple quartz glass in front of the pilot, it's kind of exposed to the high temperatures. The inside pane of that is over 600 degrees. The inside pane, I have no idea what the outside pane is, or the middle pane. The highest temperature in your oven is 550. So the inside pane of the front seat windshield is actually hotter than the highest temperature you can get in your oven. So, and the rest of the airplane is as hot or hotter than that. The actual tail end of the engine is over 1200 degrees. It glows orange when you're flying, I think. I have no idea because I can't see the back of the airplane when you're flying.
This is the fuel management and engine layout of the airplane. Dave, you want to talk about that?
Yes, for the maintenance, we had, the aircraft carried gross fuel was about 80,000 pounds of fuel. It was carried in 6 tanks. The primary tanks in the fuselage, tanks 1 through 5, ran from the fuselage back and to the tail of the center fuselage. And the center section where the gray area there is, I guess it's gray on the picture, that's where the landing gear wheel well is at. So tanks 1 through 3 in the forward section, 2 and 5, 4 and 5 in the aft, and the inboard aft wing is 6A and 6B on the right side. So that's where we carry all of our fuel. One of our problems we always had, and everybody talks about, is the aircraft new fuel. To us, it was no big deal. It wasn't a high volatile fuel. We didn't worry about it. It just made a mess and saturated everything. Your shoes, your uniforms, things like that. But we did not refuel the aircraft until it was ready to fly. We wanted the minimum amount of fuel on it, just during maintenance. So that's how we managed the fuel. But once you refuel it, it really would, especially if you start putting liquid nitrogen on board and pressurizing tanks, then it really amplified the leakage in the hangars. But we just dealt with it. We had special vacuums over in Okinawa that sucked up the fuel, and we just took care of it that way. What the other part of that one? Just the engines? Or just the fuel management? The fuel management is a very good system. It managed the center of gravity of the aircraft during flight. You had an analog program that balanced the aircraft. And when you refueled the aircraft, you had to keep the aircraft in balance. The center of gravity, anybody flies airplane, you have to manage the center of gravity of the aircraft. And that's what that system did. So for flight, we normally fuel the aircraft. Normal missions were about 45,000 pound fuel load, a certain amount of weight in each tank to give you that center of gravity. And then after they started the engines and taxi and took off, they would get a tanker, and that would push the fuel level all the way up to full tanks. And then the liquid nitrogen on board the aircraft was changed to gaseous nitrogen. So as the fuel was being fed off the tanks into the engines, the level in the tanks changed, and that void above the fuel in the tank was now replaced with nitrogen. And then inerted the fuel tanks and also produced a head pressure. And then that's what managed the fuel pressure and helped with the aircraft.
The flight envelope, and it talks about keys.
Sorry about that. You push the button the other way. I know these things. Anyway, you notice the flight envelope is very narrow. This has essentially coming off a tanker at a certain speed, and it's a fairly narrow flight envelope that follows our climb schedule. And once we get up to altitude, then we're either cruising at Mach 3 or usually Mach 3 in the middle to high 80 or 70,000 feet range. And as we burn off fuel, we do what's called a cruise climb. But every single acceleration was the same thing. We followed this little narrow band. The airplane automatically did that, and we monitored it, of course. But can't go faster than this, you can't go higher than this, you just follow that line. What I often mention is it doesn't work like a rocket. I equated it more to a locomotive going uphill. It's just, it takes several hundred miles to get up to speed and altitude, and it takes about 45% of your fuel to get there. But once you get there, then it's extremely efficient. The climb schedule is as efficient as it possibly can be. It's a fairly narrow flight.
This is the engines. There was two, of course, the A12 and others had their own different engines. They're basically the same. We had 99 that were supplied to us. That would be 34 installed engines, and we had 36 spares in the beginning of the program. And in the 80s, or mid-80s, we were getting out of spare engines. So the DCM came out to Dep 4 one time, and I had 2 spare engines for the 2 aircraft. And I looked at him and I said, "Oh, how are you doing on engines?" He goes, "I have holes." In other words, there was airplanes without engines. And I said, "Well, let's go over to this other shop and talk about that," because I felt pretty bad. Luckily, Colonel Fuller had a good sense of humor. This is the suit, John, would you talk about that one?
Sure, thanks, Robby. So, one important aspect, human aspect about flying this airplane is that since we routinely operated above 60,000 feet, literally every time we flew the airplane, we were, as Tom was describing, operating somewhere in the mid-70s to possibly below 80,000 feet of altitude. Inside the cockpits, it's pressurized. It's like in an airliner. The cabin altitude is a lot higher, but nonetheless, you get a certain survival without the pressure suit. But the reason we wore those is because in the event that you lose cabin pressure, or the less likely then you have to eject from the airplane, the suit is what will keep you alive. This was a space qualified suit, and when you're in the upper 1.5% of the atmosphere, you're not in space, but you're getting pretty close. So if your body were ever exposed to that, gases would evolve out of your body and you would boil to death, basically. So the pressure suit would keep us alive in this in a really hostile environment. And there were, in the history of this program, some people who had to eject from the airplane up at high altitude. Suit worked great. You ride down on the ground and underneath the conventional parachute. So we had tremendous confidence that this suit would keep us alive if ever we were in that situation.
This is the OBC and the equipment. Harvey?
So the OBC goes in the nose, and there's a special nose for the OBC because the whole bottom of it is open, so the camera just lifts up. The OBC, the last flights that it was in U2 was back in June of last year. So eventually I think they're going to put them in a museum, but you never know these days. The OBC had problems with heat, and we would heat the OBC 18 hours prior to flight. We would put heaters on it, get it up to 105 degrees for 12 hours, and keep it there, and it would stay there for the duration of the flight. When it flew, it regulated it. And the airplane was really cool on regulating the window. You have like 200-degree heat coming off of the windows. So the OBC rotates around and it heats it up as it's going across the front lens. as it's going across the windows. But when it goes across the top, we have a shroud with a canopy dump air, which is negative 30 degrees, with all these little tubes that's putting it onto the lens, and it keeps it at 105 plus or minus about a half a degree, which, I mean, it's kind of weird, but, you know, it works. The OBC takes pictures that are 6 feet long, the 30-inch OBC. The picture is 6 feet long, 5 inches wide, and it takes 1.71 seconds to take that picture. And it runs continually the whole flight. You know, and the RSO turns it on, and it runs until, you know, he turns it off. It can mount 100,000 square miles in about an hour. And the roll of film is 10,500 feet. I mean, it weighs, the roll of film by itself weighs a little over 100 pounds. And then the box that comes in is about another 60, 70 pounds. And it's got like 3/4 inch bolts that holds the can closed. Now the TAC cameras, like we have out here, 2 of those went in the airplane at P&Q Bay. We didn't have as much problem with the heat from those because they was in the kind of in the wind stream as you know, the airplane's flying, and they regulated everything on its own. We had a thermal monitor inside each one of the cameras that told what the temperature was. They had to have power on the airplane 6 hours prior to flight, so the camera is up to temperature. And what we never told people was that the 12 hours on the OBC and the 6 hours on the TAC could actually be on the way to the target area. But we just never told them, because if you tell them, then they're going to expect, well, oh, it's going to be 4 hours to get there. So we're not only going to give you 2 hours of power on the airplane. So, you know, that was a secret that we kept. The TACs it's a framing camera, like a 35 millimeter. It took 9x9 inch pictures, and it had 3 modes of operation where it could just, you know, continuous pictures. It could step up, step down, or then just one in the center. It could also, it was run by A&S, and what would happen was, so he's flying along here, but there's a town up here that he wants to take a picture of. A&S jump it up, take a picture of it, and put it back down, and they would never miss a beat. And always, all the pictures was 55% overlap, so they never missed anything. Every target was usually on 3 different frames. With the OBC, it had a 10%, 55% at a stereo mode. Now the stereo mode was pretty cool because it sounded like a washing machine running while it's doing it. So the first thing it would do is go up 6 degrees, take a picture, then step down 6 degrees, take a picture. And every 6th picture is of the same area. So there's 36 feet of film in between, but the two frames will be the same area, just looking from different directions. So they can look at it, and they get a stereo image. And it runs out of film really fast when you run it. So I don't think they always granted, and stereo.
Excellent. This is our missions. Next slide. Air refueling.
Air refueling, as you can see, pilot is pretty much underneath the tail of the airplane. You cannot see where the actual refueling probe is in the toward the back of the airplane. So you get real good refueling because every time you flew, you're refueling anywhere from 1 to 3 or 4 times. It was always a challenge at night in the weather when your tanker's bouncing around. Pilot is totally focused on refueling. The RSO is monitoring how much fuel is coming on, how many pumps the tanker wants to do. We don't talk to the tanker at all. We do all secure ranging to the tanker. We get hooked up. They flash their director lights under the belly to let us go into the contact position. They contact us, and the only communication we do with the tanker is through the boom interphone. So we never talk to a tanker at all. But when we talk to them, the backseater actually runs the number of pumps. The KC-135Q has 4 pumps, and he says, okay, toward the end, 3 pumps, 2 pumps, 1 pump, whatever. And it's just so that we end up with full tanks at the end refueling. As I say, you get real good refueling because you refuel all the time. That was your mission, is to refuel, but we're totally dependent on the RSO to actually monitor how much fuel we're getting. Toward the end, the tanker's going as fast as it can possibly go, and the SR-71 is kind of almost wallowing because you're getting pretty heavy with fuel, and about 5,000 to 6,000 pounds from full tanks, you become literally, the SR-71 becomes thrust limited, and you start dropping slightly. You have to let go, and you say, hey, Boomer, left burner's coming, and you go to minimum afterburner on the left engine, and you go 1,001, 1,002, 1,003. You better pull that right engine back, because otherwise once the burner lights, you're going to scoot forward on the tanker and get a forward disconnect. But anyway, so the last several thousand pounds you're flying sideways with the left afterburner on, minimum afterburner, and you modulate your position with the right engine. It just becomes part of the process of refueling. Again, you do it every single time, and you totally rely on the RSO to actually manage the fuel offload to make sure that we get full tanks at the end of refueling, and then the tanker turns away, and we begin our acceleration maneuver up to speed and altitude.
And this is a mission profile. Yeah,
Yeah, thanks, Robby. So this gives you it's a pretty good schematic of the typical missions we would fly. Whether it's training here, taking off out of Northern California and flying around the western United States, or it's representative of a lot of missions, actual operational missions that we flew. So the darker colored flight path where the airplane is on your left side there is representative of a single type loop, is what we would call it. As Tom just described, you would take off, as Dave mentioned, with about tanks half full, and go up to 25,000 feet in a big hurry and go upon a tanker and refuel just as Tom is describing it. And literally, as soon as you're full of gas, both afterburners come on and you start this profile to get you up to Mach 3 or faster and around the low 70,000 foot range. And off we would go. And after spending all that fuel to get there, you're now an extremely efficient airplane running more on ramjet power than turbine power. And we could go a long ways in that one leg. Even though you're supersonic for an hour or so, we could go from California to the East Coast of the United States or the East Coast of Canada and drop down and get more gas if we were going overseas, for example. On a training mission, those are fun because you cover pretty much the whole western United States doing one loop. Needs to go out across Wyoming and turn around Denver and go down around Las Vegas, and then come back down here to the Northern California area, either land or get some more gas. And the other line is showing you, if you started stringing your fuelings together, you could cover a lot of distance. And just coincidentally, again, Terry and I flew a very long mission one time in that airplane that's in your museum here. We actually refueled 5 times, and we covered 12,000 miles in about just a little over 11 hours. So the airplane had truly global reach, whether we're operating out of California or, as you've heard, Okinawa, Japan, or already at Mildenhall in the UK. It wasn't really any part of the world where we couldn't reach out and collect some intelligence, thanks to our air refueling capability.
These are the primary places. Beale was our home base. Okinawa, Japan was dead 1, and RF Mildenhall was dead 4. Next slide. Beale in training and in operations, those are our major training bases. Dave, you want to talk about some of the training maintenance had?
When I first came to Beale in '74, one of my first, I'd go out on the flight line as a maintenance pool, but they didn't know the aircraft yet. So I was scheduled to go to FTD, Field Training Detachment, and be trained on the particular aircraft for it was about a 3-week course, and then you learn the systems of the aircraft. And then after you graduated that, you went out on the flight line and you started doing the servicings, the inspections, and then you end up getting your first TDY, which is a deployment to our, in our case, was Canadian Air Base Okinawa, Japan. And after I came back from my first TDY, I became an actual crew chief. I had enough knowledge of the aircraft and responsibilities to actually crew the aircraft, and that was, you took the management load. Instead of doing maintenance, you were more of a manager as a crew chief. You were like a circus ringmaster trying to coordinate all the things going on around the aircraft, preparing it for flight or after flight, fixing the problems. And so that was my basic, my training that I received. But the whole time you're being upgraded, the program's called OJT, on the job training. You had a folder and you had different tasks that you were trained on and had to be signed off on. And that's throughout the whole Air Force, that just particular weapon systems you were assigned to.
Dead 4 RF Mildenhall. Obviously, we pinpointed where Mildenhall was, but this is where we covered in Mildenhall all of Europe and Asia, the Gulf. Is there a particular mission you want to talk about?
Actually, we kind of have a war story. It refers back to the quality of training that we received into. Even though you had to have high performance background in your prior to being selected for the program, it took a year of very intense training before they ever let you go fly operational missions. And usually you go to Kadena first, and then after you gain some experience there, you go to England because there were a little bit more complicated stories. And one day, Stan and I, the Sun Brothers, were operating up northern Russia, up near Murmansk, Russia. And we flew every single operation mission together. He knew how I thought, I knew how he thought. And said, Stan, left engine firelight, which we did. We had a firelight, which is very unusual. And he says, left turn heading 275, whatever. We do a several 100-mile left turning descent, and you get down to about 18,000 feet, one engine in military power. And fortunately, it was July, it was not January. But you look down there, and there's icebergs in the Arctic Ocean. And I go, if we have any problem with that engine, we're going to start with the bad engine. Anyway, we ended up landing 250 miles north of the Arctic Circle at a Norwegian base in Doya, Norway. First time we'd ever been there. It was Sunday afternoon. 2 people in the tower. The English controller spoke excellent English. The translator guy that recovered the airplane did not speak a word of English, so it was all pointy talking. The interesting thing was the demonstrated crosswind component during flight test was 29 knots, which is pretty good crosswind. And everybody assumed that was a restriction. It really wasn't. Landing in Andoya, the crosswind was steady state 35 knots. I go, you did not want to fly over the mountains to go to Bodo, Norway, because it might have had more crosswind, you never know. So we landed there in Andoya, and it turned out fine. By the time we actually got the airplane apart, all the people had been recalled. Squadron commander for the Norwegians were there, and we got to get out of our suits. And so anyway, the reason I bring that up is because the quality of the training is, it was not ho-hum because it was a real airplane, but it was far simpler than the multiple problems we had in the simulator. So again, the quality of the training really came to the forefront, I thought. And I talked about problems with the airplane, even though the airplane almost all the time came back what we call a code 1, no problems at all. But occasionally it did have a problem.
Now this is the Det 14. These are all the people I was fortunate to work with during my time. All the guys in blue, and gals, that's our intel, and that's those folks. Maintenance folks are all in civilian attire because they're all civilians, except one guy, and that's me somewhere in here. Go ahead, next slide. Det 1, Okinawa, Japan. It covered all of Asia. And is there anything you guys want to talk about? Those
One of the many great benefits of being in this program is you got to experience very interesting parts of the world, both from a professional and personal experience. And being able to go to England sometimes and then ultimately over to Okinawa, Japan, give you 2 entirely different experiences. And that applied to the kind of missions we flew. There was a lot of variety in the taskings we would get when we were flying out of Okinawa. For example, we called it kind of a milk run, but it was very common for us to run back and forth across the Korean Peninsula. So we would fly just south of the demilitarized zone, and we'd be looking far into northern Korea. And besides all the great imagery we collecting electronic intelligence, our sonic boom was going across the DMZ as well. So we were always letting the North Koreans know we were there. But so outside of that, Terry and I flew some very interesting missions against the Soviets up in the Vladivostok area. We flew a mission along the coast of Vietnam. And for me, having come on active duty just after the Vietnam War rolled out, and I've served a lot of Vietnam vets, to then see the country firsthand from that great height, it was just a lot of mixed feelings about that whole experience. But basically why we did that occasionally is to update the intelligence databases with either radar or photographic and electronic intelligence information. And other places, and as I mentioned, that long mission that Terry and I flew on, we actually, I think we got a picture of this, I'll show you in a couple of minutes here. We flew from this part of the world to the Middle East and back in one mission. So that's what's most memorable about Okinawa, was the great variety of the kinds of missions we flew there.
And this is Kadina's at one's team, and they're the ones that kept that aircraft flying. Each base had 2 aircraft at Det 1 and Det 4. This is their normal mission to Southeast Asia, the Vietnam area, 2 air refuelings and 4 hours.
That China Express picture you got up there? Yeah, okay. So this is kind of a snapshot of the mission we flew in 975. Once again, your airplane in this museum. So in the far right, you can see Okinawa depicted there, and I think in yellow, the flight path from the long way around the Southeast Asia and Central Asian countries, all to get over to the Persian Gulf area. This was 1987. You see the numbers at the top there. As I said, 12,000 miles, 11.2 hours, and 5, as it turned out, mostly grueling refuelings for Terry. But our whole point of it was to get into the Persian Gulf and do some reconnaissance of the Cold Gulf. And the reason we were doing this is because in 1987, the Iran-Iraq War was going on. It was an 8-year war from 1980 to 1988. And among other things, Iran and Iraq were waging war on each other's oil industry. And that included trying to sink oil tankers. And this was getting more and more critical from a global standpoint because so much oil transits the Gulf of Hormuz coming out of the Persian Gulf. And the Iranians had started running gunboats against anybody carrying Iraqi oil, including Kuwait's tankers. So the United States started reflagging Kuwaiti tankers on the United States flag, and that meant we were going to defend them. And at the same time, a little more history, in 1986, I think everybody remembers the Challenger disaster. We lost our astronauts in the Challenger. Space shuttle blew up not long after the launch. And it didn't fly again for a couple of years. And what that meant to us in the military, especially in the intelligence world, is that we were not replacing satellites as often as we should have been. And coverage was starting getting a little bite on what was going on in the Persian Gulf. Hence, we were tasked, the SR-71 program was tasked to fly 4 long missions like this from Okinawa. In fact, one of the pilots is here, Matt McHenry, he flew one as well. And the long and short of it was, we arrived in the Persian Gulf, flew this loop around the water as indicated on the left side over there. Got tremendous photography. It was the sun angles of a bright sunny day. What a surprise in the Middle East, in the desert, there's a lot of sun. But our mission planners set it up so that as we're flying along there, the sun angles were absolutely perfect to not only see what was going on the surface of the Gulf, but also under the oil platforms where the Iranians were trying to hide their gunboats. And obviously that all wound up in But our data we were bringing back in those missions was of national importance. So another satisfying part about flying these missions was we knew this intelligence was going straight to the top.
These are the records that were set. We're fortunate enough to have two gentlemen here now. Pat Luxon, who is one of the record holders, and the slide monitor, Ed Yielding. Now this is your time to ask us any question, and if it is classified, we won't tell you. So,
A question for Harvey. The film that went in the camera, how was that kept? Oh, okay. The film that was in the camera, how was that kept cool? Because most of the time heat will destroy film.
When Supply had a film, they kept it in the freezers. And we would only keep 1 or 2 rolls of film in the shop at any one time. So we all, it wasn't like out of the freezers for any extended
But during the
period.
flight?
Like during the flight, everything is up to 105 degrees. I mean, it sits there and soaks at 105 degrees for a minimum of 12 hours.
So the film could withstand.
So the film is up to temperature too. And yeah, it wasn't degraded. We used 3414 was the number of the film. And it's a really fine grained black and white film. And one interesting thing is, I wasn't there. This was just before I went to that one. They put a nose on, and they forgot to take the plugs out of from the bulkhead that plugs all the air coming into the nose. It came back from flight, and that's when they realized that there was something wrong. When they downloaded the OBC, it was so hot they couldn't even touch it. And I guess the picture still came out good. I never heard about how the mission went, but a lot of people got in trouble over it. Know that.
This is another question for the maintainers. The extreme conditions that the plane was under every flight, how many flight hours, or for every flight hour, how many hours of maintenance did you have to do on each plane? I don't imagine it's significant.
At the beginning of the program, it was very labor intensive. By towards the end of the program, we knew where things improved. During my time frame, about the middle section of the operational history, I can't remember the exact number, but it took about 3 to 4 hours post-flight inspection. Each broke up the area of the aircraft in 4 areas, and each man took an area inspection and servicing. The next time it was flew, servicing and took a lot of time. But everything was set on schedule. When you was going to fly the next day, 9 o'clock in the morning, 7:30 in the morning, whatever, you backed all that time up, and everything had to be done in a sequence. So that everything came to at the end, right? Everything came together right at the last moment. And total flight, Don's already left. Don could have told you. He just did all the statistical numbers. I would say about early in my program, probably about 60 to 70 man hours to every flight hour, if you want to apply that way. Later on, it was actually less than that because things became easier. It's the unknown that you're always going to question.
Something I want to say. The tech cameras, especially at that one, we only average about 250 to 300 frames per mission. And this is flying North Korea. Every fifth mission, we did what they call long functional check, which we basically go through the whole camera, check everything. And for the B models, which the ones right here are B models, it only took about 6 hours to do it, but you could get it down to about 2 hours. It had the tech route, instead of him doing something else, I would run the test and mark up the ground to give it to him, and he would make sure everything was cool. Or I just run the ground, and then I continue to start setting up the next test, then give it to him, and he would mark it up. And we could get it done really quick. We actually spent more time doing the long functional checks than we actually spent running the camera during mission sometimes. The C model is active stabilization system. So just to set it up to do the long functional check probably took about an hour. And you have to make sure it's perfectly level, because when you're doing the test, everything is based on the camera being level, and you have a bunch of different tests. I mean, the stabilization is 1 through 9 on the test that you get. When you get the test number 9, you do all of these charts. If you do one and it's bad, you got to go back and start number 1. I mean, this is you can't get time consuming. A normal long on a C model would usually take about 12 hours if you're doing it by yourself, and we could get it down to less than 8 with the tech repair.
Question for all of you: is there anything you would change about the
Be hard to improve on perfection. Honestly, all of us, those of us who flew, just speak for myself, saw different kinds of aircraft around the Air Force, and you know, they all had warts, and they were all fantastic. I really have to think hard about, you know, critiquing the SR-71 in terms of performance and just satisfaction flying the airplane. So, and the level of training and support we had to keep the airplane flying, as you've been hearing about, it was extraordinary. Tom and I were there for the last 4 or 5 years of the program, so we were, the airplane was newer in some senses and stronger, and better than it had ever been. So I can't say a bad thing about it.
Let me just add to that. Randy Shellhorse and I one time went down to London to give a talk to the British Air Society folks down there. And after our talk, one of the gentlemen came up to us, and he was a British aerospace individual who totally loved the SR-71. And he decided what he would do was run his program on how to redesign the SR-71 with today's technology. He came back and said, I could not find one line on that aircraft to change. Perfection, just like John said.
Interesting afternoon or morning here. I want to thank all of you. I had a good time doing the structure design, and that was a lot of fun. I've been working for Ben Rich. That was a great guy. Thank you.
Ed's going to get his miles just running back and forth.
Thank you. First of all, thank you all for your service. And I have two quick questions. The first one is for Dave. Would you please comment on the maintainability, serviceability of the Blackbird, especially in comparison to other aircraft you have worked on? How easy or how difficult? The second question is for everyone. You probably have a really big program. Did you have any female pilots, crew chiefs, or mechanics you worked with? Thank you.
As far as maintaining the aircraft, it was much more labor intensive because it's a very big airplane, and all the systems were basically the same as every other. You know, pneumatic systems on the aircraft are the same basically. We just had different pressures and configurations, and you know, so no airplane's exactly the same. It just doesn't happen that way. F4s, you could fly F4s as long as it was serviceable. You could fly and turn, fly and turn, fly and turn all day on an F4. But as soon as something broke, you know, it didn't come off schedule. You do surges over in Europe with F4s, and they have the 8 or 9 flights in a 24-hour period. But the SR, usually it flew, once it flew, and depending on the length of the endurance of the mission, when it came back, we had lots of inspections, fix any problems. If it came back code 1, which is operationally, it's ready to go again, that was great. But we had a system on the aircraft called the MRS, Mission Recording System. It recorded parameters. Engine parameters, air speeds, altitudes, all the engine hydraulic pressures, oil pressures, everything. You could use that as a diagnostic tool to predict when something's getting ready to fail. You start seeing a trend. And so that sometimes would introduce maintenance issues to us. One of our biggest headaches on the program was the air inlet control system, the spikes and the bypass doors that control the air down the intake to the face of the engine. That was one of the hardest systems, which no other aircraft that I knew of had something anything like that. And that became problems because it didn't take much to get out of balance. And so that was a lot of effort there. Another issue we had was because of the heat. Anytime you changed the servo, which controlled your flight control surfaces or certain components on the aircraft, we had to do a procedure called a hot gig. A hot gig is we had a furnace in a cart that heated the fluid to circulate it to the aircraft. You closed the hangar up, and the people that went in there wore you ever see fire departments wear the fire bumpers? You had to wear them for protection. Because if one of those hydraulic lines ruptured, we could be injured because it's about 500–600 degrees Fahrenheit fluid, not only the pressure, but the temperature of the fluid. And that's how you heated the aircraft up to manifest issues that we could not duplicate on the ground unless you heated the fluid that would manifest itself at altitude, but not on the ground. So that's how we tested a lot of the components. And that was a very labor-intensive process to run a hot gig. It take 5, 6, 7 hours to do a hot gig on an aircraft. But that was just some of the things we dealt with. All of our tools had were you can only use them on the aircraft. You cannot take your tool and go work on a truck on the flight line and put it back in the box. If you did that, you had to throw that tool away. And the reason being, you would contaminate that tool with particles. And our tools had to be cadmium plated or cadmium free. Titanium, when you heat it and you introduce cadmium to the surface, it can induce cracking or internal failure of the titanium. So all of our tools were kept isolated in the hangar and used only on the aircraft and nothing else. And if you had to periodically have to run a test and check if your tools had been contaminated. So that's just some of the things we did. But around other aircraft, an airplane's an airplane. They all fly the same way. They, eat fuel the same way, and so it's not a big deal. It's just this was a little bit more intensive.
The other part of your question is women flying the airplane. Actually, when NASA flew the airplane, we did have a female crew member. Interestingly, our pressure suits that we wore, my wife was the superintendent managing all the pressure suits. So yes, we do have women in important places in the Air Force, and they were in important places. They're more so now.
Hi. I just wanted to also thank you for your service and thank you for participating in this event for the younger generations. It's just incredible to experience this. I was just curious for the pilots, were you ever shot at during any of your missions, or do you know of anyone that was shot at during any of the missions? Thank you.
Interesting question. To answer your question myself, no. We have had some airplanes in the past shot at. Whether they got close, who knows? I will say that no SR-71 was ever shot down by a long ways. It was a long way from doing that. In my opinion, the Soviets probably had the best capability. However, their command and control structure was so antiquated that by the time they actually saw us on radar, it was too late to shoot at us because we were overhead and gone so fast. Not saying that we were invulnerable, however, no SR-71s were ever lost due to hostile fire.
Okay, we think of the airplane's defenses as being speed and altitude. Did you have an ECM suite in addition to that? And if so, what can you tell us about that?
Yes, we did. And that was kind of the fourth aspect of our defensibility of the airplane. So speed, altitude, I talked a little bit about radar cross-section, reduction in the design. And yes, the CIA was quite concerned when they were contracting for the A-12 that this airplane not get shot down, that we did not want to have another Gary Powers experience. So when I read more detailed historical accounts of this, I was quite surprised how much effort went into all four of these aspects. Certainly the design of the airplane to go high and fast made it a really hard target. But to work that hard on the design to get the radar cross-section down, and yet they also wanted the best electronic countermeasures that they could acquire during that time frame. And those were improved over the years, because you have to keep up with what your adversaries are doing, because they're constantly working on their ability to detect and track you and to guide missiles at you. So we had very capable electronic countermeasures, and they were used all the time on operational missions. Other than North Vietnam, the airplane was not fired on very much. Is E.D. McKim in here? One of the backseaters with us here this weekend was fired at by North Koreans on a mission. And the missile did explode at approximately their altitude or so, but it was a long ways off and did no damage to the aircraft. I have no doubt the electronic countermeasures helped out with that.
First of all, I just want to thank all of you for being here. It's quite an honor and a privilege, and really appreciate it. I have two questions, one for Harvey. Regarding the film, was there any color photographs? And also, how long did it take to develop the film? And then for Tom, is there any place or any of your missions that you felt uneasy about flying in, and why?
So yes, we did have color film. They They didn't use it on regular missions. It was always something special. And the reason was because it was just astronomically expensive. Like the 3414 black and white, 10,500 foot roll. I don't remember the exact price anymore, but the most you could put color film on the same roll, the spool, was only about 5,000 feet because of the thickness of the film. 3414 is like 2.5 mil, and color film's like 5 something. So one roll of the color, I'd heard like 25 grand for a roll. We also had false color, and it was even a little more expensive. The Recutech bill can actually process it, and they use E6, I think it is, process. And it's like, I forget, I used to process this stuff all the time, but I can't even remember. It's like 8 or 9 steps. And the film, it has to go through really slow. I mean, you have to have so many minutes in the processor or in the developer just to be able to get the image to come out. And with slides, like the color film they use, is it's actually processed into a black and white, and then it's processed as color. And the same way, if you do 39 millimeter, it's done the same way. Now, they used it, one time I can recall, they flew a mission looking for a sailor, and I think it was a commercial ship, and they fell overboard, and they're looking for an orange life preserver in a blue ocean. And they actually found a guy, which was amazing. I don't remember what other missions they flew with it, but yes, they did have color. And it was a special order thing. We had to order it and wait for it to come in. But something like that one, I think supply would keep the roll handy, just in case we needed it.
I apologize. What was the second part of your question? I always felt extremely comfortable flying the airplane, and we could fly any mission, anywhere that we were tasked. That was my opinion, of course. Some were got me your attention a little bit more than others. But basically, that was all part of the job.
I want to add on to that. The air crew and the maintenance. The air crew trusted us so much, they never did a walk around. They climbed on board. We gave them 120%. And my philosophy and everybody else's, if I can't get in that aircraft, they're not going to. So it's a close thing. And this is our conclusion, and then the film will come on. First off, I want to thank everybody for coming to the museum. I really appreciate it, and thank you for hosting us. And also, I would like to thank the spouses and our families and that supported us through our whole endeavor, through our careers. They were our anchors. I'm not kidding you. So thank you to our spouses and our loved ones that continued on. Our kids traveled everywhere we went. Our wives put up with us. Some left, but thank you again.
SR-71 pilot, or RSO. I wasn't a member of your design team at the Lockheed Skunk Works or on the assembly line that built the Blackbird. Nor was I a member of the Air Force at Beale, Mildenhall, or Kadena, who kept the Blackbirds flying. I'm not even an airplane buff in the classic sense. I'm just a person that had the privilege of being around your SR-71 Blackbird, and it was an experience I will remember intensely for the rest of my life. There's just something about your Blackbird, Kelly, that words don't adequately describe. Anyone who has been near a Blackbird and felt its presence knows what I'm talking about. It's a feeling in your gut, and instantly you want to be part of it. Part of what I call the Blackbird family. Today, Kelly, you are being honored for your design work on the SR-71, and justly so. To me, the SR-71 is not only your greatest aircraft design, it is perhaps the greatest aircraft ever built. I've heard it said that you considered the Blackbird the most fascinating challenge of your career. No wonder. It was a design that was so advanced that everything that touched it had to be new. New manufacturing processes, new tools, new materials, a whole new approach. You built an operational stealth aircraft a decade before most of the world had even heard the term. It was a design so far ahead of its time that it retired before time could catch up with it. In times of crisis, the Blackbird provided 6 presidents with a unique and critical view of the world. The Blackbird served this country for just over a quarter of a century. In that entire time, it stood in a class of one. To me, the Blackbird is much more than a technical marvel. It's an airplane that gets inside you, an aircraft that causes the adrenaline to flow just by looking at it. Kelly, your Blackbird is the stuff dreams are made of. It's the model plane sitting in a young child's room, proof that everything is possible, that the sky isn't the limit. And it's the poster hanging on the office wall of a middle-aged engineer, testimony that yes, even in the real world, miracles do occur. The SR-71 embodies all that excites people about aerospace. Its crew seems part pilot, part astronaut. The Blackbird itself appears part airplane, part spacecraft. The typical Blackbird fan is a cross-section of America. It's your grandfather, your niece, your son. It's the wide-eyed young kid that buys an aircraft book at the National Air and Space Museum. It's the family that traveled hundreds of miles to an air show just to see a Blackbird in person. It's the people on the Air Force Base that stopped what they were doing to watch an SR take off. Everyone, every time, no matter how many times they'd seen it before. And it's the pilot who last flew the Blackbird 20 years ago, who has the look in his eye that says, I flew the best aircraft ever made. The look that can barely contain the desire to get in an SR just one more time and light the burners. When Blackbird 972 made its final record-setting flight to Dallas Airport, I watched the television with mixed emotions. This was the Blackbird's final flight. An aircraft that was the very definition of speed and power. It was flying away off. But my sadness was tempered by the knowledge that this plane would now truly belong to the nation, coming to rest in the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum. Now millions would be able to do what I have done. Be near a Blackbird, be part of the family. Kelly, in the years to come, whenever I want to experience your airplane's majesty, I will remember the time I spent with your Blackbird. The smell of JP7 fuel, the feel of it on the soles of my shoes, the sound of an air starter wind up, the TEP igniting, and I'll put on the film that we shot during those incredible weeks in 1987. I'll watch it, feel it, be part of it again. Because in movies, Kelly, like in our memories, your Blackbird will fly forever. Congratulations, Kelly, and thank you. Devin Hawker, Assistant Cameraman, Blackbird, the movie.
Thank you so much again. At 1 o'clock, and please put your phones back on vibrate.